beautiful.
Hello, lovers of the world. This is Sinta speaking. I love heated rivalry so much. I haven't had this much fun in a fandom in a long time. I've been really enjoying my time with Shane and Ilya. This is episode 2 of my short pseudo podcast series about my experience overanalyzing and dissecting The Long Game by Rachel Reed. This is the sequel to Heated Rivalry and the latest installment in the Game Changers universe. This episode covers chapters 5 to... I haven't decided yet. Spoilers for the entire book though, because I've been in the Heated Rivalry fandom since late January. Being in that space just exposed me to the bigger plot points of the text, even though I haven't read them myself. So I find it difficult to hold myself back from referring to those bigger plot points. So I wouldn't recommend like buddy reading with me, for example, because I will casually drop things that have yet to happen. So even though I'm only talking about chapter 5 onwards, I might end up talking about something that happens way later in the book. So I would say like spoilers for the whole book at this point. This pseudo podcast series dissecting the book is a very indulgent project for me. So I'm playing pretty fast and loose with the spoilers because I don't want to hold myself back from analyzing this to my full capacity. I also end up mentioning things that happen in the previous book in the Game Changers universe, Role Model. So spoilers for that book as well. I'll try to keep that to a minimum though and edit out stuff that I feel like if it's something I mention while I'm filming and then I'm like, oh, maybe that's not as relevant, I'll try to take it out. But if it's relevant to the way that I analyze Shane and Ilya's journey in the book, then I'll probably have to keep it in. So with that, let's get to chapter 5. So the previous episode, I covered chapters 1 to 5. Chapter that we're covering today is actually quite dense for such a short chapter. It's only like 2 to 4 pages, but there's so much characterization in here that I was able to find and identify to the point where I'm like, just talking about this short chapter, I'm already like, I'll save the next chapter for a different day because that's also another dense thing too. So we are up to chapter 6 now. Okay, so the book, sorry. So the chapter opens up with Shane and Ilya eating breakfast together, I guess. And then Shane just suddenly blurts out. So what happened before this was a sex scene, right? And in the last podcast episode, I was talking about how abrupt and sudden the tone shift is. So they're having sex and they're like having a good time or whatever. But then the way that they kind of go to bed is a bit like kind of throws the reader off a little bit because first of all, when Shane goes back to bed with Ilya, the text says that Ilya is distracted and Shane woke up at some point because he realized that Ilya had woken up and had smoked a cigarette outside. I guess like it must be like it might be a fandom thing, but like the way that the fandom has kind of shaped the relationship that Ilya has with smoking is kind of like I couldn't separate how I've come to see Ilya's smoking from just based off of reading fanfic and like people's headcanons online and reading the source material. So to me, I was like, there's something kind of ominous about the way the chapter 5 ends that like I think sets up the stage for the chapter 6. So Shane and Ilya are sitting and eating breakfast and Shane just suddenly blurts out, "How many men have you been with?" And obviously it's like we as the reader have no idea what they were talking about before this. So I think the text and the writer does a good job of on the picking up where we left off in the sense that the last chapter had like a very like abrupt switch in tone and then the next chapter is just like another abrupt, like we're just plonked right down into their conversation and we're like, what brought this on, Shane? Like we don't know if something reminded Shane of anything that made him want to talk about it this way, but it is kind of like notable the way that the chapter opens this way. And then I wrote down in my as an annotation that like it's a very impulsive or like almost like it's an intrusive thought that Shane impulsively shares, which is not very characteristic of Shane, or maybe it is because like Shane overthinks a lot and then I think sometimes he doesn't necessarily like obviously we know that Shane plans and like prepares ahead of time for like everything and anything, but the way that this was set up, it's very much like he had this thought pop up in his head and he just couldn't help but say it out loud. And then I also thought it was interesting because Ilya is stalling. Like, he doesn't want to give Shane like a straightforward answer. Like, I'll talk about this a bit later. I did think was a bit like side-eye because clearly Shane is bothered by this, and I guess I was just curious about Ilya's motivations for not just coming clean about saying that like this and this. He does eventually, but the way that he kind of toys with Shane is kind of interesting. Like, it's a dynamic between the characters that is definitely notable, and I'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, because Shane like at some point is like annoyed that he's not getting a straight answer, and at some point he basically avoiding Ilya and like trying to escape. And I wrote down in this post-it note, he's embarrassed, so he's trying to escape as if this wasn't a conversation that Shane was prepared to have, which is crazy for Shane. It calls back to the previous chapter that I noticed Shane's frequent declarations of love to Ilya is something he can't seem to control. Shane has a thought, and because he's around Ilya, he's like, he can't control himself with just expressing how he feels at that moment. So either he is so comfortable around Ilya that he lets himself speak his mind, or let his guard down to express these like deeper and scarier feelings, or his love or his overwhelming emotion is just overflowing to the point where he can't turn it off. He can't stop himself from expressing it. And then I just thought it was interesting because like in the like again, Ilya is being such a rage baiter, and I guess I know that Shane finds that charming, but I just thought it was like funny because he's like, where you go, like Shane had left the kitchen and Ilya was like, where are you going? And then Shane's like, I'm going home. And I'm like, yeah, Ilya, what did you think was gonna happen if you were gonna piss him off? Of course he's gonna leave. In Ilya's kitchen in Ottawa, and Shane has to go back to Montreal. Ilya is obviously trying to like diffuse the situation that he himself set up, mind you. Like, he wouldn't be having to diffuse this like anxiety-ridden conflict if he had just given Shane a straightforward answer. While I was reading this part out, but I wrote this in my notebook. Ilya's tendency to put a humorous spin to diffuse or deflect conflict can irritate me as a person, not necessarily as a reader, because he is an entertaining character to observe, spectate on, but he is not a partner I would want for myself. Neither is Shane too, though, lol. Ilya's rage-bending tendency is charming only to a certain extent to me, but I'm sure to Shane and others it's a boundless source of comfort and levity. There are points where I have to separate my personal feelings about Ilya if he was a real person versus him as a character and what the narrative needs him to do, as well as how he's actually a really great partner to Shane and the way that he can understand Shane's insecurities and anxieties and find a way to disentangle him from that. Eventually, like, to be fair, I think Ilya in a lot of ways approaches this in a very like healed manner, because at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter how many people Ilya has been with. What matters is that he is with Shane right now. I think Ilya does recognize this very true fact, which is why he feels comfortable and secure in kind of like messing around with Shane. And I think he eventually gets Shane to see that like it doesn't matter how many partners Ilya has been with, because he's with you right now and you need to focus in on the moment. And I think it's a highlight to Shane's insecurity with his relationship with Ilya, feeling like he's not good enough for Ilya. And then I do think that like it's very notable that this is the kind of thought he's having as he's about to leave, because he has to leave anyway, but it's more just like the way that the text frames it, it's like he's being driven away by Ilya, but like no, he actually does have to leave anyway. He just doesn't want the sour feeling, the sour taste in his mouth before he leaves. I do wish that this chapter, like, we were in Shane's head, because I really want to know what spurred this on. I wrote this down here, like why he thought about it that way. And I think it wasn't until the end of the chapter that I have an answer for it. But I'm trying to go through this like in more or less chronological order. If this chapter was happening in Shane's point of view, his pain and hurt at like, I think Ilya's like making light of the situation would be front and center, in the same way that like in the first or second chapter where we were in Ilya's head when Shane very callously and dismissively made that comment about his mom and Ilya's mom. Like, we were in Ilya's head, so we get a front row seat to Ilya's hurt. But I wish that we were in Shane's head right now, because I think this is a kind of like reaction I would love to see from his point of view, instead of having to kind of read between the lines like what I'm doing right now. You know, finally Shane calms down and You know, I actually really like the way, again, like Ilya was able to diffuse the situation, that like, is there a wrong answer to this question? And like, no, because the answer that Ilya gives is the answer that is true. Like, even if, doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if Ilya has slept with 500 men. That's in the past. And I think like Shane needs to feel secure in their relationship. And he's not feeling secure right now because he has to leave him, and he knows that he's gonna feel lonely, and then he's thinking like, oh, like, will Ilya miss me? Like, will he want to be with other people? Like, I sympathize with him so much. Yeah, the situation diffused. Shane exhaled loudly. Are you ready to do another season of this? Ilya's heart stuttered. What did that question mean? Another season of what? Shane pulled back enough to look him in the eye, hiding. So this is another... Like, Shane is always communicating. Like, I can't take it. Like, Shane is always wanting to communicate and reach out. Like, he wants to know what Ilya is feeling. Very similar, like, I mean, it kind of mirrors the way that the chapter started in the first place, with a question. Shane is always asking questions. I love that about him. I love Shane down. Okay, anyway. So yeah, it has, at this stage of the book, it is their 11th NHL season of hiding, 7 seasons of secret hookups, and 3 seasons of being in a mostly secret committed relationship. It had been a lot of hiding. Oh my god. Sure, Ilya said. And I'm like, you fucking liar. Like, we just had so many chapters of you previous to this, of you crashing out over wanting to be with Shane and wanting people to know that you guys are together. I just wish he's a liar. He's not being honest with himself. Quote, Shane smiled sadly at him. 3 weeks wasn't such a long time, but Ilya was so goddamn tired of having their relationship sliced up into single nights with weeks between them. 2 nights in a row if they were lucky. And then what is interesting is the way that the book is formatted. The way that this question is actually directly next to this monologue that Ilya is having about hiding and stuff like that. To me, actually, it made me realize that instead of like Ilya lying, because even in the text it said, sure, Ilya said, whereas there have been many times prior to this where if Shane was lying or if Ilya was lying, the text would say, sure, Ilya lied, something like that, or sure, or it's not that bad, Shane lied. I do think that Ilya genuinely thought that he could still keep going, so he is actually lying to himself too. By lying to himself, he is unintentionally lying to Shane because he doesn't want to confront the fact that he is actually suffering. Shane is asking him point blank, like, do you want to keep doing this? And like, we will never really know what would have happened if Ilya had just been honest and said no, because he didn't. Like, I actually am really curious about how Shane would have reacted to Ilya being honest. Shane is a planner at heart. I do think that he would have recalibrated something. He would have listened to Ilya's feelings, but he can't listen to Ilya's feelings if Ilya's not communicating. Another note down about Shane asking Ilya whether he was ready to do another season of hiding. Shane asking Ilya if he's still okay with being in the shadows. Part of Shane is probably also asking for reassurance that Ilya still finds him worth waiting/hiding for. Shane is insecure, but he took that first step towards a topic that is painful for him to talk about. Ilya could be with other people, and instead he is like basically stuck with Shane not being with him and being distant from a partner. And Shane is willing to put himself in uncomfortable situations and barrel through it to get through it. Another post-it note I wrote, Shane's second to last thought before he leaves Ilya for the road is tinged with jealousy and insecurity, that Ilya might miss a warm body to keep him company while he's gone, that Shane's constant absence might remind Ilya what he could have if he wasn't with Shane. So the first question is, how many men have you been with? And second question is, are you still okay to keep hiding? This is actually one of my favorite passages, I think, so far. Ilya was talking about how he's tired of their relationship being sliced up into, short chunks. The text continues, quote, except the summers when they were together almost every day, and Ilya's soul lightened as he soaked up Shane's proximity the same way his golden brown hair lightened in the sun. Ilya loved hockey, but he lived for the summers now. I really love this metaphor. I think this is one of my favorite passages so far. I love this imagery of Shane as the sun, the importance of summer, the heat that warms Ilya's soul, the light that transforms him, shining a spotlight on his best qualities. The text kind of creates this almost dichotomy or juxtaposition or contrast with the summer and the winter, because hockey is a winter sport. Hockey has always been like painted as a bright and, you know, fun, joyous thing for the two of them. You know, the sport itself. I think like there is definitely a love for the sport embedded in the text as well as the show, especially because we've had those scenes of them at the hockey camp. Like the text does a good job of painting everything that comes with the hockey, with the sport, the feeling of coldness, the ice, like all of that as something fun. But this is the first time where we are given an alternative to that, which is the summer, and the first hint of winter and the cold being a negative thing, I guess. So, quote, "Summer was over. The NHL regular season officially started in 2 days. His soul would have to live on sun-drenched memories and anticipation of stolen nights of explosive sex and tender kisses. I love you," Ilya said between deep breaths he was taking in an attempt to cool his blood. So again, like, we're gonna talk about another chapter in a different time. Peace out. All right, cool. We are chugging along to chapter 7. So, chapter 7. I find this very intriguing. The chapter opens with one word, dynasty, italicized. I don't know, I feel like I circled that part. The thing is, like, when it comes to hockey with this book and this entire Game Changers universe, I, as somebody who has no prior experience with hockey, doesn't live in Canada, like, or not even in the States, where not even a country that likes or understands ice hockey specifically, that it's just, there's probably so much that I'm missing out on because I'm just not culturally entrenched in the importance of hockey. Being in the fandom space, I've been seeing a lot of like tweets, I guess, of people trying to really explain or spell out why Boston versus Montreal is such a big thing, because they've got this like really long historical rivalry. And I've seen even some fans try to dive deep into the history of Canada versus Russia back in the like 80s, with how hockey became the vehicle or the arena through which politics can play out. And so I do feel like I'm missing out a lot of context that is not necessary to understand or engage or love the text itself, but I do wish that I had that, just so that I can kind of analyze or dissect this a bit further, because the chapter opens up with dynasty, and I believe what's happening here is the ceremony where Shane is in somewhere, I think an arena in Montreal, where they're raising the banner for the Stanley Cup. So they're watching it kind of rise to the rafters. This is another thing that I again don't know anything about, so I'm picking up on context based off of being on the fandom as well as like the later chapters. But like, this is like, I guess, something that happens when your team wins. I just find it interesting that dynasty, I mean, that's why she chose it in the first place, but dynasty conjures up this idea of historical importance because of its ties to royalty and families and history. It really feels like there's a sense of this is who is supposed to be ruling, almost like this is supposed to be at the top. This is who is supposed to be on the throne, sitting on the throne. It's a good word choice because it's very evocative very quickly for somebody who doesn't know a lot about hockey and like what the importance is of the Montreal hockey team to be at the top. So yeah, this is the third banner ceremony, meaning that this is the third Stanley Cup that Shane and his team has won. I underlined this quote: "After so many years of barely making the playoffs, Montreal had a dynasty hockey team again, and there was no reason to be modest. It had started with him." Shane takes a lot of pride in, and I think that's why he holds his accomplishments very close to his heart, because he feels like he sacrifices so much, and he does sacrifice so much. The diet, his relationships with not just Ilya but with other people, his relationship with himself and his identity, his body. Okay, so my notes are kind of all over the place because this chapter 7 feels like a very dense chapter character wise. I think up until now it's been a lot of like fluffy times, and there's like some subtle hints about what is to come with their relationship. Those previous chapters, we were in the cottage, it was still summer. This isn't it, we weren't yet in real life, but now we are. So I think this is where the book starts to kind of jam in a lot more important aspects about their relationship as well as what's going on in their lives separate from each other, as well as what's happening inside that their respective partners don't have access to, but we as a reader do. The first chapter, I mean, Shane's ambition and competitiveness is a huge thing. Oh yeah, this is something I should have talked about. So the reason why I love Shane a lot, I think, is because there's just a lot of things that we have in common. Neurodivergence, I have ADHD, Shane has autism. Being people of color, I'm Filipino. Specifically Asian as well. Like, I'm Filipino and Shane is half Japanese. We both come from kind of like immigrant families. I know Shane might have been born in Canada already, but there is that kind of otherness that we're very familiar with. Oh, I'm queer. Shane is queer. So I think there's a lot that we have in common that I just don't have with Ilya. Like, while I find it fun to engage with Ilya as a character, I do feel a lot more intimacy with Shane because of the inherent traits that we both share. However, something that I cannot relate to Shane with is his the sheer intensity of his ambition. I'm ambitious in a specific way, but Shane is like another level. Of course, he's an elite athlete, and his competitiveness. Like, I am not very competitive at all. I simply do not give a fuck. I am winning the IDGAF war for real. Even this year, I've started getting really into specific sports. I really like tennis. I've been playing badminton a lot, and I am trying to get into hockey just as a sport, but there is no point in any of those sports wherein I feel like I want one person or myself to win. I don't really care about who wins or who loses. I am more drawn to the entertainment, the spectacle, the drama that the sport has to offer. So I always say, even in if I'm watching a specific game, like a tennis game, I don't really care who wins or loses. I actually am drawn more to whoever is giving me a more entertaining game. I really am only here for the entertainment, and I cannot relate to Shane's really burning desire to be the best. I just don't have that as a personality trait. So that definitely colors the way I engage with him and as a character, and the way he makes his decisions based off of his inherent competitiveness, because it's something that is very much a key part of him. That's what, I don't think he would be Shane Hollander if he wasn't competitive and ambitious. This is an interesting paragraph. Quote, he loved being a Montreal Voyager. He loved what he and his teammates had accomplished here, and he wanted to keep doing it for the rest of his career. And I've been trying to chew on Shane and Ilya's relationship to hockey a little bit more, and I might be jumping a little bit ahead because I've actually reached up to chapter 12. The end of chapter 12 is the last time I had finished reading this book. I've been trying to decipher or navigate Shane and Ilya's respective relationships to hockey, and something that I've been trying to parse out is whether or not what is it about being a Montreal Voyager that Shane loves, because it's not his teammates. I don't think the only people he seems to talk to here is Hayden and JJ so far, at the very least, right? Ottawa is his hometown. He didn't grow up in Montreal. I haven't seen him really talk about what it really means to be a Montreal Voyager, so I wrote that in my notes. I don't think Shane loves being a Montreal Voyager. He just loves to win. And the thing is, I think he can win anywhere. It doesn't matter which team he'll be in. That team is gonna win no matter what, because he is in it. The Montreal Voyagers just happen to be the team that he's on, but I fully believe that if he was drafted to literally anywhere else, he would have won no matter what. So he would have loved being a Boston Bear if he was there, because the Boston Bears would have won because he's there. That's my hot take so far, by the way. I don't know what exactly he loves about being a Montreal Voyager, other than the fact that they're the defending champions. His teammates, he doesn't really talk that much about them. And so to me, what does it mean to be a Montreal Voyager aside from winning? Conversely, or in relation to that question, what does it mean to be Shane Hollander without hockey? I think it's a topic of conversation among fandom spaces, Shane's identity, because he's wrapped himself around hockey, has wrapped itself around Shane, and Shane has wrapped himself around hockey so much to the point where he doesn't know where hockey ends and where hockey begins, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. I think Shane is a very fiercely loyal person. I think alongside his competitiveness and his ambition and perfectionist, dedicated person, that dedication comes with the loyalty to some place. If he was drafted literally anywhere else, I think he would have been loyal to that team. I don't think it matters who that team was. That is still his team, and that's who his loyalty will always lie. The text is introducing the fact that by the end of the year or the season, whatever, he can sign to his contract with the Montreal Voyagers ends, and he can sign to whoever he wants, and then he fully intends to sign with this team again. He says, quote, this was his team, these are his fans. Again, But what about the fans do you like? Do you just like that they're there? Do you like that they love and respect your talent? Like, I just wish it's not something that like the text really goes into, like, which is fair enough. Like, this isn't, there's a lot of things that the text has to juggle. It's only a very short book. There's only so many pages a book has to dedicate to that relationship. But I do think, like, what do you like about being a Montreal Voyager? I don't know if maybe he doesn't really think about it that much, but anyway. And then the next page, like, something that I've noticed that I like about this book is the way that the formatting and the way that each chapter actually leads, like, each page contributes to the way that the text and the story is presented, because like, you turn a page and then the next line is, and those were his 3 fucking Stanley Cup banners. Like, Shane is, I think, very possessive over his own accomplishments. Like, I think maybe the text will talk about this a bit more, but I do think that his identity as a Montreal Voyager is dependent on the winning. So like, to him, like, he has to be a Montreal Voyager because those are his accomplishments. That's something that he had done as a Montreal Voyager. So if he is, like, that's why he wants it, because it's something that he has done and very possessive over. Like, it's his reward for being. Ugh. Okay. Oh, this part is really interesting and kind of dark and foreshadowing almost. Quote, he'd earned that. Even if he quit right now, he'd have done enough to earn that. So this is something that, again, I've picking up, but when a number is retired, that means that person was so important and so spectacular that everybody agrees that that number belongs to them. So like Shane Hollander 24, like 24, nobody else in the entire hockey league will ever have 24 ever again. Same, I think, with Ilya. Like, those are my boys. They're my goats, for real. Like, people are so lucky. Sometimes I think I'm lucky and everybody else is lucky that Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov are not real people, like real athletes. I think I would actually go fucking crazy over them. So this chapter is very dual perspective. So now we switch on to Ilya's perspective in Ottawa. Another thing that I've been liking is this play on the contrasts, because right after Shane, she's like, let's get it. And then it switches to Ilya's perspective, and it's like this really interesting contrast of how their hockey seasons are going. So either this is Ilya's first or second season with the team in Ottawa, and he's still kind of adjusting to the difference in cultures between Ottawa's hockey and Boston hockey. Boston, because it's like a winning team, they had certain expectations. I highlighted this part. The fans in Boston had expectations. They wanted champions. Ottawa seems a bit, obviously, is more relaxed because nobody really expects the team to win. Quote, Ilya hated it. The worst part was that it didn't even make sense to him. Ottawa had the elements of a great team, himself included. Their new coach, Brandon Wiebe, was untested and very young, but Ilya liked him already. And now, of course, there's Wyatt and Luca. He couldn't be a whole team. I highlighted this part where, so this is the beginning of the game, and then the fans, like, they're all calling each person's name, I guess, and then the fans went wild. They truly did love him here in Ottawa. It was nice, which is interesting because I find this chapter a little intimidating to unpack, because I think there's just so much to dissect, kind of like Ilya's relationship with Ottawa, like in the same way that Shane's relationship with the Montreal Voyagers is so tricky to navigate. I think it's the same in this initial stage of Ilya's transfer to Ottawa. There's a sense that he's not feeling like he fits in still. Like, I think the way that the logo, in the next paragraph, he talks about the Centaurs logo, a cartoon drawing of a centaur playing hockey. Ilya wasn't sure how exactly that would work. It was sort of the perfect representation of Ottawa's team, though a bunch of things mashed together that had no hope of winning hockey games. Ends with him saying maybe. So I think it's a very good contrast to the way that Shane's point of view ended, which is him being like, let's get it, like, fucking right, let's get it. It's like a good way to show the Ilya's uncertainty to Shane's certainty. And then again, another great contrast. So in his point of view, Ilya did say like, oh, everyone is nice. Like, the fans like him. My coach is, personable. I have like the elements of a good team is here, but we are losing. The next paragraph, the next point of view we have is the Montreal Voyagers are winning, but then the coach sucks. He's like, this was one fucking game. Coach Thorold said in his usual gruff, humorless tone, we've got a long season ahead of us, so let's not start jerking each other off just yet. So it's like they won the game, but like the coach is not happy. And I'm like, Okay, I love this part. Quote, Shane nodded along with the rest of them, agreeing with his coach, but wishing he could have used less homophobic wording. After nearly 30 years of a life in hockey, though, Shane barely knew what counted as homophobic anymore. It kind of calls back to the previous chapter where they were at the summer camp, and as well as his double date with Fabian and Ryan. Shane, just his like entire worldview is dictated through hockey and him not knowing how to fix it, basically. He sees the world through hockey culture lenses. I wrote down, I like what I wrote. Like a fish who couldn't understand what water is, homophobia and sexism kind of just permeates through hockey culture. Shane has to get out of the water to understand what even he is surrounded by, to even recognize that he's surrounded by something else, you know? I highlighted this quote. This team strove for perfection always. It wasn't easy being a Voyager, but at least the hard work and sacrifice paid off. I wrote that in my notes as a response to that. The perfection and high standards is a promise/vow to the league, his coach, compared to the open expectations of Ottawa Centaurs. Ilya's point of view focused on the fans, Shane's point of view on the degrading way coach talks to the team. And then in the next paragraph, he's talking about how disappointed he is that Ilya is on a losing team. Based off of the way people talked about this in fandom spaces, I thought this was gonna be more pointed, or like people were like, oh, Shane got the ick because Ilya kept losing games, and I'm like, are you sure? Like this is the shortest. Like I thought I was expecting more based on the way people were painting it out on fandom online spaces, and I'm like, okay, this is like barely 5 sentences. But I did write, Shane's ambition and pride is his key characteristics. Competition is what got him to fall in love with Ilya in the first place. So he's grumpy that there's no challenge, that he can't do his favorite thing in the world, which is play against the love of his life. The text makes it clear, though, that even though Ilya is on a losing team, he as a player has not stopped racking up points. He is still amazing on the ice. So Hayden and Shane are talking, getting dressed after the game, and Hayden is like, wow, coach is still such an asshole even after the summer. And Shane's like, yeah. And Hayden's like, wow, you didn't cheer up over the summer either. And then Hayden invites Shane to basically have lunch after practice, and then Shane is like, I have my meals pre-planned for the week. And Hayden shot him a withering look. Can I get takeout and eat at your house? I just want to hang out, you fucking doofus. And Shane is like, oh, shit. Was Shane a terrible friend? Probably. Sure, of course. And I wrote down, Shane is not picking up that lunch and food is a conduit for personal connection because he just sees it as fuel and nothing more. So basically the food, the way that his diet is being like used as a narrative device here, it's like it's being dangled in front of him, and then he can't do anything about it and I guess it just makes him more annoyed because it's something that he can't have. And I guess if you were to use food as a metaphor, if we're saying that he can't have food, then he's also feeling like he can't hang out with other people because he like feels like he has to be disciplined all the time. But it's also just like the autism. I know people love to roast and lash at Hayden, but I'm actually really neutral about him. The only people I really, really care about in the book is Shane and Ilya, which is like totally fair. I don't see why people, maybe it's because I didn't read My Dinner with Hayden short story that Rachel Reed posted online. The way that fandom paints him, I thought he would be like way more homophobic than he actually is, and it's like he is like a completely normal guy. Like, yeah, he's a hockey player, so like it's not like he's like the most #woke person ever, but like he supported Shane. He's like still reaching out to Shane even when Shane is, you know, quite avoidant and distant from him. Understands that Shane, the way Shane is, like even he's the one who brings up like, oh, let's have a look at the Ottawa game scores, like in Shane's point of view. Like I'm like, Hayden's fine. Like I don't get it. Like maybe I'll change my mind. I'm open to changing my mind. So then we switch back again to Ilya's point of view. I'm low-key getting whiplash, the way that we like swap back and forth. But I think this is kind of good because again, it's the sets of contrasts and juxtapositions of the subtle ways that their situations are different to each other and the ways that each person is trying to deal with that set of circumstances. Ottawa lost, but Luka has scored his first ever NHL goal in his first ever NHL game. There was reason to celebrate. Very cute, very sweet. The way that the coaches are portrayed, like you can't see it because of my fucking Hayden and Shane are talking about coach is over here. On the page across it is the coach being nice and kind to everybody. He's like complimenting people's work. I saw a lot of the good things that make me hopeful even though we lost, and he like identified what went well. Already we can see that Coach YB is like a nice guy compared to Coach Thorold. Now, why would you do that? All right, so and then they obviously like, go Luca. Like, I would love if Rachel decides to write a book about Luca that like in the Game Changers universe. That would be so slay. Because I love this line where it's like, the fucking future right here, Boot announced loudly, ruffling Luca's short, sweaty hair. And then he handed Luca the gold puck and everyone cheered. And then I just feel bad because I think this is another sign of Ilya's like depression and mental illness like clouding his self-esteem, because he's like, oh, like, I am such a shit captain. This other guy should be the captain instead. Where did I write that really good? Okay, yeah. So yeah, I wrote this in another notebook. He's talking about how he should be the one kind of cheering on the teammates, but he's feeling very avoidant with his whoever's around with him. Quote, he used to be the center of this sort of thing, dancing in the middle of the room to make his teammates laugh. Now he only felt a deep bone exhaustion that couldn't entirely be blamed on the game he just played. Depression! He specifically says that, oh, Bood should be the team captain instead. I don't know why they gave it to me instead. Which is crazy because like, if you read Role Model, anyway, I'll just read out what I wrote. Ilya's low self-esteem as captain warps his understanding of his impact. In Role Model, he was like a lifeline to Troy Barrett. Even the next page, like him talking to Luca, his conversation to Luca, literally the next page, he does not shy away from offering comfort when his rookie needs it. So it's not like he's shirking from his responsibilities. Like, he's there for his people when he needs to, and he's still like obviously the best player on the team. I think he's doing fine, but like, he doesn't feel like it. He's like, I should be doing more, I'm so worthless, da 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 da. His wanting to pass on responsibilities to someone else and the exhaustion he feels from depression, I think, is notable. But even recognizing who is a better captain requires a level of attention to detail and observation. He has to be paying attention to people to know like who would make for a good captain in the first place. And then I just wrote, what does Ilya think a good leader does? His mental illness, guys. In the next scene, he's talking to Harris. Yay! So we were introduced to Harris in the previous book. At this point, Troy Barrett hasn't arrived yet, but the text is like already explaining that Harris and Ilya get along really well. And I highlighted this part, Ilya talking about Harris in his head. Quote, Ilya grinned at him. If anyone could improve his mood in a hurry, it was Harris. Everyone on the team loved Harris, which Ilya appreciated because Harris was openly gay. He wasn't sure Harris would have been as warmly accepted in Boston. He wouldn't have been invited to team outings, that was for sure. So not only is Harris a comfort to Ilya because of Harris's personality, but the fact that Harris is openly gay and everybody seems to be okay with that, I think gives Ilya a lot of hope for because he eventually wants to come out too. And I think that's why in the previous chapter where I was saying that like Ilya is a lot more willing to come out versus Shane, because Shane is like trapped in the torture tunnel that the Montreal Voyagers have built specifically for him. Clearly, the Ottawa Centaurs are like, there's already so many instances of the Ottawa Centaurs being more open-minded because they've got Harris, and Coach YB is actually a really nice guy, and everyone seems to be very, fun. And then I wrote down in my post-it note, Ottawa is a clean slate, a team no one had any strict or specific expectations for, so likely why there was not as much pressure for them to bend to the image of the rest of the hockey league, such as Boston or Montreal, in the way that Coach Therault kind of perpetuates the homophobia and to a certain extent misogyny that the hockey world has, because everyone's holding them up to a higher standard. Same with Boston, where Boston only wants winners. Because nobody gives a shit about Ottawa, I think Ottawa has way more like space and leniency to experiment, almost like, because nobody's paying attention. Eventually Ottawa, inshallah, will like set the tone for the league, and it will literally change the game. So anyway, they're still in the locker room and most everyone has left except for Luca and Ilya. This is where Ilya and Luca kind of have a chit chat about basically Ilya being a mentor to Luca, doing your first goal in your first game, like that's where it all starts, which I think is very sweet. Ilya doesn't realize the impact that he's leaving on other people because he's so trapped in his own torture chamber. In the paragraph below, he says he knew rationally that he wasn't worthless. He was an NHL all-star, the captain of his team. He was beloved by fans. He had a wonderful boyfriend who loved him so much he was willing to endure a lot of stress and sneaking around just to be with him. He was loved. Next page. But he wasn't sure he deserved to be. He couldn't make himself believe that. Not right now. I'm gonna kill myself. This is not fair. And then oh, Ilya's dead. I'm gonna kill you. We quote weak, his brain said in his father's voice, disgusted and cruel. And then I don't really know, like this is another like strange contrast again to what Shane and Ilya are going through. I think I've seen this frequently cited as like ammo against Shane, and I'm like, Shane can't read his mind. But like, yeah. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 7. That's the end of chapter 7. We are going to finish this whole book. The next time you see me, I will have finished the whole book, but I will still continue talking about specific chapters in sections.